The most widely used mosquito repellent in the world was developed by the United States Army in 1946 for use in jungle warfare. It dissolves plastic. It degrades synthetic fabrics on contact. It has been associated in research with neurological effects in children at high concentrations, and it is sprayed on human skin by millions of people every summer as the default solution to a problem that a $3 bottle of plant-derived oil addresses with comparable effectiveness, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The insect repellent market in the United States generates approximately $3 billion per year globally. DEET, N-diethyl metatoluamide, is the active ingredient in the majority of those products. Off, Cutter, Repel, and their competitors have built their market dominance on a compound that has been the industry standard for 75 years. In that same period, the research on botanical repellents has accumulated to the point where one plant-derived compound, oil of lemon eucalyptus, has earned a recommendation from the CDC as providing protection comparable to DEET-based products at appropriate concentrations. That recommendation exists. The product providing it costs $3, and it does not dissolve the watch band it contacts during application. This is the story of what DEET actually is, what the research says about the alternative, and why the $3 option does not occupy the same shelf space as the $10 bottle of Off. DEET was developed by the United States Department of Agriculture on behalf of the U.S. Army following World War II, specifically for use by military personnel operating in insect-heavy environments. It was introduced for civilian use in 1957 and became the dominant mosquito repellent compound within a decade. The mechanism by which DEET repels insects was debated for decades. The traditional explanation was that DEET interfered with insect olfactory receptors, blocking the sensory signals that mosquitoes use to detect human hosts, specifically the carbon dioxide and lactic acid cues that draw mosquitoes toward warm-blooded animals. More recent research using electrophysiology and genetics has produced a more nuanced picture. DEET appears to activate specific olfactory receptors in mosquitoes that generate an avoidance response, rather than simply blocking detection. The insect does not just fail to smell you, it actively does not want to approach. The practical effect is reliable and well documented. At concentrations of 20 to 30%, DEET provides robust protection against mosquitoes for between 4 and 8 hours, depending on concentration, temperature, humidity, and sweating. At higher concentrations, protection duration increases marginally. Concentrations above 30% do not meaningfully extend protection and increase chemical exposure without proportional benefit. DEET is effective. This is not in dispute. The question is, what comes with that effectiveness, and whether an alternative that the CDC has specifically endorsed produces comparable protection. The concerns about DEET that have accumulated in the research literature over 75 years of widespread use fall into two categories: material effects and biological effects. The material effects are straightforward and demonstrable. DEET is a solvent. It dissolves certain plastics, degrades synthetic fabrics, including nylon and rayon, damages leather, and attacks painted surfaces. If you have ever applied DEET to your skin near a watch with a synthetic band, contact lenses in their case, or sunglasses with plastic frames, you have seen this firsthand. The compound that is being sprayed on human skin is aggressive enough to degrade man-made materials on contact. This is not a toxicity concern in itself. Solvents are not necessarily harmful to biological tissue, but it raises a question about what an effective solvent is doing to the lipid layer of human skin and to the biological compounds that skin contacts and absorbs. The skin is not impermeable. DEET is absorbed transdermally. It enters the bloodstream after topical application. Studies have detected DEET in the blood within hours of application and in the urine of people who used DEET-based repellents regularly. The biological effects at normal consumer use concentrations are generally considered acceptable by regulatory bodies. The EPA has reviewed DEET and concluded that it does not pose a health risk when used as directed. This conclusion is based on the available evidence and the reasonable interpretation that decades of widespread use have not produced an obvious epidemic of DEET-related health problems. But the research picture is not entirely clean. A study published in the Journal of Toxicology found that DEET at high concentrations inhibited acetylcholinesterase activity in rat brains, the same enzyme inhibited by organophosphate nerve agents, though through a different mechanism and at concentrations substantially higher than those typically encountered in consumer use. Studies examining DEET exposure in children who have higher skin surface area to body weight ratios and may be more sensitive to absorbed compounds have produced more cautious conclusions, with some researchers recommending lower concentrations for pediatric use. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends concentrations of no more than 30% DEET for children over 2 months of age, an implicit acknowledgement that higher concentrations carry concerns that lower concentrations do not, and that children represent a higher risk population for transdermal chemical exposure. None of this makes DEET clearly dangerous at normal consumer use concentrations. It makes it a compound with a 75-year safety record that includes caveats and for which a CDC-endorsed alternative with a simpler chemical profile exists. Oil of lemon eucalyptus is the compound that changes how this comparison should be framed. Oil of lemon eucalyptus, also known by its synthesized form PMD, paramenthane 3,8-diol, is derived from the lemon eucalyptus tree, native to Australia and China. The active repellent compound PMD is produced during the refining process of the crude essential oil. It is distinct from the essential oil of eucalyptus in terms of chemical composition and repellent activity. In 2005, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention updated its mosquito repellent recommendations to include oil of lemon eucalyptus alongside DEET, picaridin, and IR3535 as products providing long-lasting protection. This was not a casual endorsement. The CDC specifically noted that oil of lemon eucalyptus at concentrations of 30 to 40% provided protection comparable to DEET-based products in controlled studies. The controlled studies supporting this conclusion are significant. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine compared multiple repellent formulations in a field setting with high mosquito pressure. The oil of lemon eucalyptus product tested provided protection for approximately 7 hours, comparable to low-concentration DEET products, and significantly longer than many of the natural plant oil products also tested, most of which provided protection for under 2 hours. The protection time of oil of lemon eucalyptus at appropriate concentrations is competitive with DEET at similar concentrations. The chemical profile is substantially different. PMD is a monoterpenoid compound derived from a plant with no record of solvent activity on synthetic materials and no documented neurological concerns at consumer use concentrations. This does not mean oil of lemon eucalyptus is appropriate for every situation or every user. The CDC specifically notes that oil of lemon eucalyptus should not be used on children under 3 years of age, a different restriction than the DEET guidance, but still a relevant caveat. It is also not recommended for protection against ticks in the same way that high-concentration DEET is, as the tick repellent data is stronger for DEET, and it requires reapplication more frequently in hot, sweaty conditions. The sweat resistance of DEET formulations is generally better than botanical alternatives, but for the average person wanting to spend time outdoors in the summer without being bitten, in conditions of moderate to high mosquito pressure, oil of lemon eucalyptus at 30 to 40% concentration provides CDC-endorsed protection comparable to DEET from a plant-derived compound without solvent activity on materials, without transdermal absorption of a synthetic chemical, and at a cost significantly below most DEET-based products. Why, then, is the average person standing in a drugstore reaching for OFF rather than oil of lemon eucalyptus? The answer is market structure. S.C. Johnson, the manufacturer of OFF, generated revenues exceeding $10 billion in 2023. The OFF product line has occupied the dominant position in the consumer insect repellent market for decades through consistent advertising, retail placement, and brand recognition. The blue and yellow packaging, the OFF name, and the association between DEET-based repellents and effective mosquito protection have been so thoroughly established in consumer consciousness that most people do not evaluate alternatives at the point of purchase. Oil of lemon eucalyptus products, Repel lemon eucalyptus, Cutter lemon eucalyptus, and similar products that have entered the market following the CDC endorsement are present in most drugstores and outdoor retailers, but typically occupy less prominent shelf positions and carry less consumer recognition than the DEET products beside them. The marketing investment behind them is smaller, the brand history is shorter, the consumer familiarity is lower. Additionally, oil of lemon eucalyptus cannot be patented as a natural compound. The specific formulations can be differentiated, but the active ingredient is available to any manufacturer, which limits the pricing power and margin that would support a large advertising investment. DEET formulations have been differentiated through concentration, delivery format, sprays, lotions, wipes, and brand positioning in ways that support premium pricing despite the commodity status of the active ingredient. The result is a consumer market in which a CDC-endorsed botanical alternative with a competitive efficacy profile is consistently overshadowed by a synthetic compound developed for military jungle warfare, marketed with decades of advertising investment and priced at a premium that the natural alternative does not command. Here is the practical framework for using oil of lemon eucalyptus effectively. The product must be specifically labeled as oil of lemon eucalyptus, or PMD. Paramenthane 3,8-diol. Products labeled simply as eucalyptus oil or lemon eucalyptus essential oil are not the same thing and do not have the same repellent efficacy. The refining process that produces PMD from crude lemon eucalyptus oil is what creates the active repellent compound. Look for a concentration of 30 to 40% PMD. Products below this concentration provide shorter protection periods and are more comparable to the shorter-acting botanical repellents rather than the DEET class products. Apply to exposed skin and clothing. Unlike some essential oil-based repellents, oil of lemon eucalyptus at effective concentrations does not need to be applied every 30 minutes. At 30 to 40% PMD, a single application provides protection for several hours in moderate conditions. In hot, humid conditions with heavy sweating, more frequent reapplication is appropriate. Do not use on children under 3 years of age per CDC guidance. For children over 3, it is an appropriate alternative to DEET at low concentrations for moderate mosquito pressure situations. Reapply after swimming or heavy sweating, as water exposure reduces the duration of protection from any topical repellent, botanical or synthetic. For situations involving significant tick exposure, hiking in tall grass and tick-endemic areas, the evidence base for tick repellency is stronger for DEET and permethrin-treated clothing until the research made it unavoidable. And even then, the marketing investment behind the botanical option is a fraction of what sustains the synthetic one. The mosquito does not know the difference between off and oil of lemon eucalyptus at appropriate concentration. It responds to the chemical signal that tells it to avoid the host. Both compounds produce that signal. One of them also dissolves watch bands. If this changed how you think about what you spray on your skin before going outside, hit the like button. Share it with someone who has been using DEET on their kids every summer without knowing there is a CDC-endorsed alternative. And subscribe for more of what the industry prefers you never figure out.